Yo, what's up, chefs? This video is going to teach you everything you need to know about stats and gear to start building your own BIS kits for whatever class you're playing. I've broken it down into 4 sections and you can find the chapters below. Without further ado, let's get into it. Getting things started with the first section, we're going to be covering the basics of gear. All gear has different base stats, such as riveted gloves with armor and strength, the Adventurer Tunic with armor, max health, and minus move speed, or even dark leather leggings that have armor, minus move speed, and instead of something like strength or max health, replace that with magic resist. Furthermore, as the rarity of the item increases, so will the base stats. Let's use riveted gloves as an example. Junk quality has 1 strength, common has 2, uncommon 3, rare 4, epic 5, and finally legendary with 6. In addition to base stats, uncommon quality gear and above will begin to have random modifiers. As the rarity of the item increases, the number of modifiers goes up as well. For example, uncommon items have 1, rare items have 2, and epic items have 3. In very rare cases, there are exceptions to this with crafted gear that tend to have 1 extra modifier than what their rarity would usually indicate. Finally, some random modifiers can only be found on specific types of gear, such as additional move speed. Arguably the best random modifier in the game can only be found on boots, making Lightfoot boots with this modifier very valuable. True physical damage, another great modifier, can only be found on rings, capes, necklaces, and finally gloves. And these are just some examples, but in the next section where I define each modifier, I will also include what items they can be found on. That's going to conclude the basics of gear. Now that you have a solid understanding of how gear works, let's move on to section 2, where I cover and define each random modifier as well as the items they can be found on. Moving on to section 2, random modifiers. I want to briefly say that there is a ludicrous amount of information on this topic, and I'm going to do my best to cover as much of it as possible, but there is ample room for error, so if you notice that I missed a stat or explained something improperly, please respectfully correct me in the comments below to help ensure any new players get the proper understanding. With that out of the way, I'm going to start off with the main attributes, so grab some popcorn or your favorite snacky, sit back, and enjoy. First up is strength. Your strength stat increases your physical power and max health. To elaborate, each point of strength gives you 1 point of physical power, which translates into physical damage bonus on a scaling curve. Additionally, each point of strength gives you roughly 0.25 max health, equating 4 strength to 1 point of HP. Vigor. Your vigor stat increases your max health and health recovery. Each point of vigor gives you roughly 2 max health. Health recovery affects the rate at which you restore gray health while resting, and this scales with a curve that resembles a mixture between an S-curve and a logarithmic curve. Agility. Your agility stat increases action speed, move speed, and interaction speed. Agility increases your action speed relatively minimally with 25% scaling. Each point of agility after 15 gives you 0.75 movement speed, and finally, agility increases your regular interaction speed with 40% scaling. Dexterity. Your dexterity stat increases action speed, manual dexterity, and item equip speed. Your dexterity has a 75% scaling towards action speed, item equip speed is rather self-explanatory, and manual dexterity is the speed at which bards play their instruments. Will. I'm not joking, your will stat determines 7 other stats. So I won't touch on them all at this moment, but most importantly, it determines your magical damage bonus, magic resistance, which translates to magic damage reduction, and finally your buff and debuff durations. Knowledge. Knowledge governs spellcasting speed, memory capacity, and memory recovery. Your knowledge increases spellcasting speed on a logarithmic curve, meaning the curve is steep at first and flattens out over time, so the earlier points of knowledge are the most important here. Memory capacity determines the amount of spells or songs for Bard that you'll be able to properly use in-game. And finally, memory recovery determines how quickly you recover your spells while resting. Resourcefulness. Resourcefulness increases interaction speed, cooldown reduction, and persuasiveness. Resourcefulness increases your interaction speed with a 60% scaling. Each point of resourcefulness from 0 to 20 increases your cooldown reduction by 2%, starting at negative 30%. So at 20 resourcefulness, you'll have 10% CDR, and each point after that up to 50 increases it by 1%. So at 50 resourcefulness, you would be at 40% CDR, creating a logarithmic curve. Persuasiveness determines the duration of bards, songs, and debuffs in a very complicated way, so just know that the more resourcefulness you have, the longer your buffs and debuffs will last on average. Moving on, I'm going to be defining the random modifiers that can be found on gear excluding the main attributes. I'm going to be doing these in alphabetical order and applying a generalized ranking to them where D is the worst and S is the best. However, just because I rank a stat as S doesn't necessarily mean it's good for your build or class, so make sure to stick around for section 3 where I go over the best stats for each class individually. If you want to know what items a particular random modifier can roll on, then the easiest way to do so is to go into the marketplace, choose the stat in the random modifier filter, and then open the slot filter to see what items it can roll on. First up is action speed. Action speed is your attack and block speed. Additional magic damage. This is additional damage added into the magic damage calculation. To elaborate, this is affected by the target's magical damage reduction and other multipliers such as limb and headshot damage. Additional memory capacity. This is additional capacity to slot spells or songs for Bard. Additional move speed. This is a flat increase to your character's speed. Additional physical damage. Additional damage added into the physical damage calculation. To elaborate, this works the same way as additional magic damage, as it is affected by the target's physical damage reduction and limb or headshot multipliers. One benefit this stat has over true damage is it does apply to physical damage skills such as Rupture, whereas true damage does not. Additional weapon damage. This is an addition to the base damage of your weapon. To elaborate, this goes at the beginning of the damage calculation, meaning it is affected by your physical damage bonus stat, which makes it very good for characters with high strength. Armor penetration. This is a percentage reduction of the target's physical damage reduction. To elaborate, if you have 10% armor penetration and the target has 50% PDR, then you will be ignoring 5% PDR, which makes this stat mainly effective against high PDR targets. Armor rating, a flat increase to your armor, which translates to physical damage reduction. Buff duration bonus, a percentage increase to the duration of buffs applied to your character. To be clear, this is not buffs that you apply to others. Debuff duration bonus, a percentage increase to the duration of debuffs applied to your character. Luck, a rather obfuscated increase to your chances of finding higher quality items. I have a video where I compiled over 400 luck and did a thorough test and did not find a drastically noticeable difference in the quality of loot I received. Magic penetration, a percentage reduction of the target's magical damage reduction. This stat operates the same way as armor penetration, but for magical damage calculations. Magic resistance, a flat increase to your magic resist, which translates to magical damage reduction. Magical damage bonus. This is a flat increase to your magical power bonus stat. To elaborate, 1 point of will after 15 translates to roughly 2.25% of magical damage bonus, and multiple other stats, so will is usually better. Additionally, each point of magic power also translates to roughly 2.25% magical damage bonus, also making it more preferred typically. Magical damage reduction, a flat increase to your percentage of magical damage reduction. To elaborate, magic resist scales your magical damage reduction on a curve, whereas magical damage reduction is always just a flat increase to the percentage of magical damage that you ignore, making it more or less valuable depending on what part of the magic resist scaling curve you are on. Magical healing. This is a flat increase to everything counted as magical healing. To elaborate, magical healing is utilized by Cleric spells, Warlock's Torture Mastery, healing potions, and Troll's Blood. However, all of these different things have individual scaling amounts with magical healing. Lesser heal from Cleric, to my understanding, scales at a 1-to-1 ratio, whereas Warlock's Torture Mastery scales at a 1-to-0.1 ratio, or 10%. Magical interaction speed. This affects the speed at which the player interacts with magical items. To my understanding, this only affects the speed at which you interact with shrines and portals, making it not very useful and more so just convenient at times. Magical power. This is a flat increase to your magical power stat, which translates to magical damage bonus. Each point of magical power roughly translates to 2.25% magical damage bonus. Max health. This is a flat increase to your character's maximum HP pool. Max health bonus. This is a percentage increase to your character's maximum HP pool. To elaborate, if you have 100 maximum health and you get 1.5% max health bonus on a piece of gear, it is giving you an effective 1.5 extra max health. Memory capacity bonus. This is a percentage increase to your total memory capacity. Move speed bonus. This is a flat increase to your percentage move speed bonus. To elaborate, 300 flat move speed is equivalent to 100% move speed bonus, meaning 330 flat move speed, which is the cap, is 110% move speed bonus. So in essence, 1% move speed bonus always translates to a flat 3 move speed and is not affected by whatever your current move speed is. Getting this and plus additional move speed on your boots is BIS. Physical damage bonus. This is a flat increase to your percentage physical damage bonus stat. To elaborate, every point of physical power over 15 and below 50 is equivalent to 1% physical damage bonus, but usually physical power rolls higher, making it slightly preferred. Physical damage reduction. This is a flat increase to your percentage physical damage reduction. This is the physical damage counterpart of magical damage reduction, so similarly, armor rating translates to this stat on a scaling curve, whereas this is always just a flat increase to the percentage of physical damage that you ignore. Physical healing. This is a flat increase to everything counted as physical healing. To elaborate, physical healing is utilized by campfire kits, Bard's Jolly Time perk, Ranger's Field Ration skill, and I believe bandages, but I'm not 100% sure on the bandages part. Keep in mind, each of these can have their own individual scaling amount. Physical power. This is a flat increase to your physical power stat, which translates to physical damage bonus. To elaborate, every point of physical power over 15 and under 50 translates to precisely 1% of physical damage bonus. Projectile damage reduction. This is a flat increase to the percentage of projectile damage you ignore. To elaborate, projectile damage can come in the form of magical damage, such as Ice Bolt from wizards, or physical damage, such as arrows from a ranger. So while I'm not entirely sure of the calculation, I do know that if you have a lot of PDR and a good amount of projectile reduction, you will be taking very little damage from arrows, because in some way, shape, or form, they play off of each other additively, I believe. In addition to that, since it crosses the boundary of physical and magical damage, it can be quite useful in that regard. Regular interaction speed. This affects the speed at which the player interacts with most items. To elaborate, this affects the speed at which you open doors, chests, interact with the gold pile, etc. So while it's not the most useful stat in the game by any means, it can help you loot quicker and open and close doors quicker, which definitely has a solid use case. Spell casting speed. This is a flat increase to the percentage increase at which you cast spells. To elaborate, if a spell takes 1 second to cast and you have 50% spell casting speed, you will now cast that spell in half a second. However, every point of knowledge over 20 and under 50 translates to 2.5% spellcasting speed, meaning you would normally prefer to just get flat knowledge. True magical damage. This is additional magic damage added into the end of the magic damage calculation. To elaborate, this functions similarly to additional magic damage, but it ignores any magical damage reduction that the target may have, and additionally any limb or headshot modifiers as well. This means that it will always be a flat 1 damage increase to your magical damage calculations. The only instance where this is less effective than additional magic damage is if you're hitting someone in the head with a spell that has a low magical damage reduction. True physical damage. This is additional physical damage added into the end of the physical damage calculation. To elaborate, this functions similarly to additional physical damage, but it ignores any physical damage reduction that the target may have, and additionally any limb or headshot modifiers as well. This means that it will always be a flat 1 damage increase to your physical damage calculations. The only instance where this is less effective than additional physical damage is if you're hitting someone in the head with an attack that has low physical damage reduction. Alrighty, now that we've defined all of the random modifiers, let's hop into section 3, where I'll be outlining some of the best ones for each class individually. Keep in mind that this will primarily be tailored to solo play, and as such, solo builds, but will be largely applicable to duos and trios as well. Also, just to be clear, these are in no particular order and are all generally good. Starting things off with the Slayer Fighter. The fighter is going to want additional move speed, true physical damage, strength, vigor, dexterity, max health, armor rating, and additional weapon damage. Next is the Barbarian. The Barbarian is going to want add move speed, true physical damage, strength, vigor, dexterity, max health, add weapon damage, and max health bonus. Following that is the Rogue. The Rogue is going to want additional move speed, true physical damage, strength, vigor, max health, and add weapon damage. Next up, the Ranger. The Ranger is going to want add move speed bonus, true physical damage, strength, agility, add weapon damage, and physical power. Next is the Wizard. The Wizard is going to want add move speed, true magical damage, knowledge, agility, will, magical power, and max health if you can afford it. Following that is the Solo/Paladin Cleric. The Paladin Cleric is going to want add move speed, armor rating, vigor, true physical damage, strength, true magical damage, max health, and will. Moving on, we have the Bard. The Bard is going to want add move speed, true physical damage, strength, vigor, dexterity, agility, max health, and armor rating. Next, we have the Torture Mastery Warlock. The Warlock is going to want add move speed bonus, true magical damage, magical healing, knowledge, will, vigor, and max health. And finally, we have the Druid. The Druid is the most recent class to release, so take this with a grain of salt, and this is subject to change. But you're going to want add move speed, true physical damage, strength, dexterity, vigor, max health, and armor rating. Now that we've covered the best stats for each class, let's hop into the last section where I'm going to be building a full Bard kit using the marketplace so you can see how I like to build kits and get a good understanding of it yourself as well. Most of this would also be translatable to Fighter, Barbarian, Ranger, Rogue, and Druid, although not a one-to-one match of course. This kit is going to be mostly green items, so it should be relatively budget, but don't be fooled. A full kit of green items with the proper rolls will absolutely smoke a player running a full kit of blues and purples with random rolls. I promise you that. Also, this may not be 100% optimized since a perfectly optimized kit is going to be subjective, but it should be at least 95% plus optimized for sure. Alright, hopping into it, as you can see we are completely naked, so we're going to head over to the marketplace, and especially if it's your first time building a kit, a really easy way to get started is to set the random modifier filter to true damage, and then start with those items, since you'll almost certainly want them. So I decided to start off with rings, and I prioritized the rings of vitality because I really like max health, and vigor isn't going to be a base stat on many of my other items, as you'll see. Next, I moved on to getting my cloak, which I chose to go with a mercurial one for the dexterity base stat since I wanted to make sure I got somewhere close to 30 dex once the kit was done. So I knew I would probably need it on the cloak. I obviously wanted true physical damage on it and spent a little bit of time seeing if there was anything cheap that had a good secondary stat, and eventually just ended up adding max health to the filters and getting what I consider to be a relatively bis blue rarity cloak. Following that, I decided to purchase my necklace, and once again, I knew I wanted true physical damage, but currently the best way to get true fizz on your neck is to go for a frost amulet, which actually has it as a base stat and can go all the way up to +4 on a legendary version and can't roll it as a random modifier. However, if you chose a different necklace, it can only roll up to +1 as a random modifier. I also ended up adding max health as a random modifier for this, and then searched for the cheapest one that had a somewhat useful secondary stat, since anything with a really useful second stat would likely be very expensive. After acquiring the necklace and quickly equipping all the purchased items so far, the only remaining item that can have true physical damage to get is my gloves, and I chose to go for a nice cheap pair of reinforced gloves since once again I value the max health, and this would be the only other item I ended up getting vigor as a base stat on. After that, it was time for my helmet, and I prefer the straw hat for its strength base stat, and because I find it's a lot cheaper to go for reinforced gloves plus a straw hat rather than riveted gloves and a leather cap, since the leather cap can be used by all classes and is very sought after by Slayer fighters. So this way you get the same base stats for quite a bit cheaper. Also, the reason why I went for Vigor instead of Max Health as the random modifier is because on smaller items like the helmet, Max Health can only roll up to +3, compared to on a chest piece or pants where it can roll up to +6. But the amount of Vigor that can roll is the same on both types at +2, which is equivalent to 4 Max Health. So generally, as a rule of thumb, getting attributes is better on smaller items, and getting quote-unquote substats is better on bigger items. For my chest piece, I wanted to go with a Wanderer attire for the dexterity base stat, and as you can see, I opt to go for max health on this item as opposed to vigor like I did on the helmet. I also ended up deciding to shell out a little extra coins to get one with strength and max health, which is quite nice. After that, I exit the market to just take a quick glance at my stat layout to determine exactly what I want to get for my last items. However, I knew I would definitely be wanting a pair of Lightfoot boots with additional move speed no matter what, and the amount of move speed I ended up having with those boots would help me better choose what type of pants I wanted to get as well. And if you're staying relatively budget, I recommend looking for a pair of greens with +5 or a pair of blues with +4 and an additional somewhat useful stat, since the total move speed ends up being the same either way. Here I just quickly check what my move speed ends up being now that I've got the boots equipped, and ultimately I was deciding between either padded leggings for the vigor base stat or cloth pants for the dexterity. I really wanted to stay as close to 305 move speed as possible though, and I was exactly 4 dexterity away from 30, which is my sweet spot, so I decided to go for the cloth pants in the end. The random modifiers I were looking for were the same as my chest piece, which was strength and max health. Now that I had all of the gear out of the way, it was time to look for my weapons. Now this may be a little weird to some people, but I've really been enjoying Rondel Dagger Bard recently for a number of reasons, such as being able to effectively fight in doorways, and a little bit less move speed penalty, especially now that the Rapier has been bumped up to minus 15 speed total. The random modifiers I believe to be the best are add weapon damage and max health, so that's what I looked for. Next up was the Buckler, which if you want to get a rare one, I think the best stats are either armor rating and add weapon damage, or armor rating and physical damage reduction. Ultimately, the add weapon damage version seemed pretty cheap, so I just went with that. And finally, you'll never catch me playing Bard without a survival bow at this point. It still seems to be insanely strong even after the true physical damage nerfs from about a week ago, so I decided to go for an epic one because I know they are pretty cheap and the important stat to look for is +2 additional weapon damage. Anything else like physical power or physical damage bonus are the icing on the cake though. You shouldn't be concerned with something like max health however, because you will only get the stats of weapons while they are in your hands, and you really shouldn't be getting hit too often while you've got your survival bow out. So all damage stats is the way to go here. At this point, the kit is complete, and as you can see, the stats are looking pretty crispy. As far as the important stats go, we have 21 strength, 20 vigor, 13 agi, but our move speed is still high, 30 dexterity, which is right on the money for a budget kit, and all of those attributes will be increased by 2 with our Rousing Rhythms buff in-game. We've also got 146 HP, which will be 149 with the weapons out since we got +3 max health on the dagger, and it'll actually be 154-ish due to the extra vigor and strength we get with the Rousing Rhythms. We've got 304 move speed, which will be 315 with full song buffs, 11% action speed, which will be close to 21% with full buffs. Finally, we've got 16.6 PDR, which will go up to about 23% with the buckler in hand and fully buffed. But in a perfect world, I would like that number to be a little higher. But that's going to be kind of hard to do without upgrading to more epic items and getting plus armor rating as the third stat, which will legit break the bank. Ultimately though, this kit is an absolute powerhouse and you'd be a menace in the dungeons if you ran this exact kit. So I can't say I'd really change anything about it, especially for the price coming in at right around 4,000 gold, give or take. Anyways though, that's going to wrap up the video. I hope you guys learned something new and were able to enjoy the process along the way. This was easily the hardest video I've ever made by a legit country mile and took me probably 15 to 16 hours to accumulate all of the information and then edit/create it. But I'm really happy with how it turned out. If you've got a spare moment, make sure to hit that sub button. We're almost to 1,000 subs, which is absolutely crazy, and it's all thanks to you guys. And last but not least, take it easy, chefs.